Hi class, let's talk about frailty, living situations, and elder abuse in late adulthood. So frailty starts to become an issue in late adulthood, such as having physical disabilities, cognitive or psychological disorders, or being very ill. About 40% of people over 65 do have some kind of a limitation. There are two types of limitations that I want you to be aware of. And if you work in a nursing home, as many of my students do, you're probably already familiar with this. And the distinction is ADLs and IADLs. ADLs are called activities of daily living, and these are your basic self-care things. So are you able to eat, bathe yourself, dress yourself, and walk? The IADLs are activities, instrumental activities of daily living. These are activities that require some kind of intellectual competence and planning, so a more cognitive aspect to it. So this chart is showing any kind of disability across the lifespan. So you can see that if you're under the age of 15, about 8 or 9% of people have any kind of a disability. By the time you're in your 40s, about 20% of people have a disability. And then by the time you're in your 80s, about 70% of people have some kind of disability. 56% of those will have a severe disability in the 80s. Frail older adults are prone to anxiety and depression, especially if they're in a long-term care facility. As we get older, we have more and more need for assistance, and females in all ethnic groups are going to have more of a need for assistance than males do. Something to keep in mind, ladies, when you're asking a man around you to do something heavy or do the heavy lifting, we should do those things so that our frailty does not increase when we're older. This next two charts show limitations in ADLs and IADLs. So the blue bar shows none. So you can see across the lifespan, even at 85 years of age, there's not that many people who have a limitation in ADLs. Remember, these are eating, bathing, walking, things like being able to dress yourself. But it's not insignificant. About 5% of people 85 and older have one. And then about 10% of people who are 85 and older have 3 or more. You can see the 70s people are doing fairly well, and 80 seems to be a cutoff where things get worse. Limitations in IADLs, the yellow bar shows no limitation there, and the purple bar shows yes. So this is one where there's quite a few more people who have IADL limitations than ADL limitations. So in the 70s, about 12-15% of people from 75 to 85 will have a limitation, and 85 and older, something about like a third of people will have some kind of limitation. This is things like, can you balance your checkbook? Can you schedule and keep your appointments? Do you remember and can follow directions of what the doctor said? Can you handle your business affairs? Things like that. A little bit on living situations. People always want to stay at home. We have very much a sense of place associated with our home. We have emotional attachments to our residences. I've told you guys before that we just moved. We went over to the old house to get it really ready to sell it to the new people. And my daughter spent a fair amount of time hugging the tree in the front yard that we planted when we first bought the house. We have these kinds of emotional attachments, and older adults certainly have that. So older adults do not want to move in with family or friends, generally speaking. There probably are some cultural differences here, though. They certainly don't want to be in an assisted living center or a nursing home. Now, I want you to understand the difference between these two. Assisted living is where you probably have your own separate apartment where you stay, but cooking and cleaning are probably some services that the facility offers. There's some nursing care, but it's not full-time and it's not going to be intensive. A nursing home, probably less privacy, and full-time nursing staff, and much less that you do for your own self. If you want to try to stay in your home, or you want to help an older adult stay in their home, making some modifications to the home can be really helpful. Widening doors so that if they need to get through with a wheelchair or a walker, they can do that. Altering toilets and showers with handles or height adjustments or seats can make a big difference too and allow a person to stay at home a little bit longer. Assisted living facilities are for people who have ADLs or IADLs but don't need 24-hour care due to physical or cognitive impairments. They don't provide 24/7 care, but they do provide some care. About 2/3 of people who are in those kinds of facilities are 65 or older and have one or more limitations of ADLs and IADLs. About half of them have some kind of a memory impairment. Nursing homes are the most intensive. They do provide that 24/7 medical care. They only house about 5% of our older adults in the United States, but they do house 15% of people who are 85 and older. The last thing to discuss on this section is elder abuse and neglect. There are 7 different types of elder abuse: physical, sexual, emotional, financial, abandonment, neglect, and self-neglect. The most common is neglect. About 60% of abuse cases are an issue of neglect, where the family is simply ignoring the person. They may get bed sores, they may not be bathed adequately, and somebody's simply letting them lie there. This is shocking, right? Sexual elder abuse. This can be something like an aide in a nursing home sexually assaulting someone who is incapable of resisting. Sometimes it's something like a married couple, and maybe the one of the spouses is not conscious, and the one who is wants to have a relationship with them. That can happen too. That's a sticky legal kind of a situation. Physical abuse is the second most common type of abuse at 16%, and then financial or material exploitation at 12%. About 5 million people a year in the United States are victims of elder abuse, but that number could be higher because this is not something that is all that commonly reported, because who would report it? Who's doing the abuse and neglect? About 2/3 of the time, it's the family who is doing it. At other times, it might be a care provider or somebody else who is trusted, like a banker or a clergy person, or it might be a telemarketer or somebody involved in some kind of an investment scheme. You're more likely to be victimized if you are poor, if your family has a lot of problems, or if you are socially isolated. You're more likely to be victimized if you are dependent upon the person who is abusing you, or the person who is abusing is desirous of financial gain. Sometimes it's victimizer retribution. So somebody might abuse somebody who had abused them previously, and sometimes the victimizers simply want to gain a sense of control or power. So those are factors involved. So be familiar definitely with ADLs and IADLs, with the different types of living situations like assisted living and nursing home. Be aware of the 7 different types of elder abuse, and be aware that neglect is by far the most common one. Okay, we'll end there, and I'll see you next time.